Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today we got another faction ranking video, and if you ask me, it's a little long overdue. It's been a few weeks since I did the last faction ranking, and Empire is a great one, so it's the logical next step. If you haven't seen a faction ranking before, it's my rating system is a little bit more stringent than Marquee, a little more lenient than Journey Guide, but it's on the lower levels, it's way more lenient than Journey Guide. On the top, it'll be probably similar to like a Journey Guide ranking. And I go through in alphabetical order so that it's not obvious who's coming up next, and I'm not just going worst to best or best to worst. And just keep it fresh. I normally have the green lightsaber crystal at the top, but since the Empire is mainly evil, I gave them red. So the first one we're looking at is Admiral Piet, and he definitely deserved a spot in S tier. He's the fleet commander of one of the best capital ships in the game. He makes the Imperial Trooper faction something amazing. It was decent before him, but it wasn't a must-have. So that Emperor's Trap, boosting offense and potency, is incredible. Marking someone for either defensive or offensive purposes is great. So when you're marking Dark Trooper, he's assisting all the time. And like I went over in my unknown faction mechanics, if the person he gives inevitable failure to dies, he's actually going to get a huge boost. But the best thing about him is the Fleet Commander and Emperor's Trap. Next up, we got Colonel Stark, one of the only characters with a leadership title without a leadership ability, and he is in C tier for me. So he was part of kind of the original Imperial Trooper squad, but he's really fallen off because there's just so many better options out there. You can still stick him with Iden Versio though, because he doesn't have a leadership tag, and sometimes that happens. But for me, I haven't used him in a while in either squad. He hasn't made the cut in either. But he's pretty good. What I like the most about him is his offense up and crit damage up. On his special, it really helps get the ball rolling for a critical chance critical damage, not offense up. You're getting offense up from Admiral Piet. Helps get the turn meter train rolling. And he recovers protection health on himself, and he also removes turn meter from enemies on his turn. So if you have your turn meter train going and you have Stark on your team, he's going to start removing stuff, turn meter, but he's not meriting much more than a C tier for me. Next up, we got another trooper. We got Dark Trooper, and he is A tier. Very strong character. Basically all about damage. He is the only other character similar to B1 in the game, but much different with stacks of himself. Only 4 as opposed to 50 or 100 with the Zeta. And he just, he hits super hard. You can't crit unless he has advantage, but at least he does have a possibility to crit. And fun fact, droids were droids as a faction have mostly been structured to not be able to crit because of HK-47's leadership. I don't know if it's weaker than it used to be, but it used to give turn meter for crits, like a good amount of turn meter, so they just really had to limit the turn meter, so that's why all these droids aren't critting. But he's great with the current Datacron system, or a set with the turn meter gain one. He's always going first, and you can actually make use of that special where you're giving turn meter to the whole squad. But usually you want to just do his basic, and he's kind of unique in that his basic is the best thing about him because it does insane damage. But I guess Fennec Shan too. Next up we got Darth Vader, and Darth Vader is clearly in the S tier. He is a little bit ahead of Piet, and I am on the brink of reevaluating my pedestal for Darth Vader because he just, I don't know, he hasn't been doing it for me as much lately because he doesn't have a home. I mean, Lord Vader doesn't truly need him a lot of the times. He does help. In 5s, I'll probably be using Darth Vader with Lord Vader, unless I'm doing some kind of solo. But he doesn't have Palpatine to go with because Palpatine and Mara Jade usually go with, Starkiller, and then there's no room for Darth Vader. I know there's some teams where people are using Darth Vader with Starkiller, but I prefer the kind of the classic version. But Merciless Massacre is still a force to be reckoned with. The fact that they can't lose turn meter is great. And I use his leadership sometimes to solo the Sith raid, so it's one of my few options there. So I still think he is a great character, and he should be, based on his status, in the the lore canon. Next up, we got Death Trooper, and Death Trooper, another C tier character. He's a little bit ahead of Stark because he definitely makes the cut on an item team. He's a priority because that death mark he brings is very important. The buff spell, very useful. Daze, pretty useful. When everyone's assisting, you're getting daze out from him. He can stun. Just preventing revives is pretty important in a lot of teams he faces. So like Mon Mothma is a very common counter. So he's very useful for that with preventing the revives. His Zeta is weird because it's all about him and Director Krennic, which isn't that helpful, but still decent character, higher C tier for him. Next up, we got Director Krennic, Death Trooper's buddy, and he's D tier. He only gets out of F tier because he's got an Omicron. Well, I mean, the Omicron isn't even that great, but he has a leadership. He can do stagger, AoE stagger is something, so I don't think that definitely merits F. His leadership isn't that useful. It's got some potency, some crit chance. You can inflict ability blocks when you critically hit enemies, and then you also recover protection when you crit. Only 10%, but that's not enough. That's not enough to cut it now. It was funny, the one match where the guy accused me of cheating, he was like, the biggest match he was like skeptical about. He was like, how'd you beat my Director Krennic team? It's like, oh, it wasn't too hard. Next up, we got 8th Brother, and he is in the B tier, which is kind of like the Inquisitors tier. There's going to be a lot of Inquisitors in there. I think he's pretty good. I said it before in the 2022 Marquee rating. I like 8th Brother. I really like all the debuffs he can spam. And I like his second special where he's doing tons of stuff. He can have like healing immunity, speed down, ability block, buff immunity, and armor shred, more importantly, which is kind of important for the event. But it does a lot of damage if you have enough stacks. I've done like over 150,000 total with it. Kind of seen more. And I love his first special, dealing out burning, accuracy down, blind possibly. It's just a lot of good stuff to love there. I do enjoy using 8th Brother in that squad over 2nd Sister. Next up, we got Emperor Palpatine. And Emperor Palpatine is top of the A tier. Not quite S tier, because he is reliant on a lot of other characters, but he is so facilitatory. He just facilitates so much. His leadership is amazing. It was actually the first Zeta I ever applied in the game. Because that turn meter train is crazy. It's off the charts sometimes. I love how it works with Marjane Starkiller. I love using that team on offense. It's just so much fun. And he was one of the original turn meter loops in the tank raid, interestingly. You'd get to phase 3. There were 6 enemies, so you'd shock everyone. And he'd get like turn meter on his basic, 15% for each enemy with shock. And he's also getting turn meter when he's inflicting a debuff from his leadership. So he was like looping infinitely. So it was pretty funny. Just great character. AoE stun, gotta love it. Shock is still an amazing buff that was introduced with him. Great character. Next up, we got 5th Brother, and he is in the mid B tier for me. He gets a little higher than 8th Brother because he is a leadership. He is the most useful leadership other than Grand Inquisitor. So if you don't have Grand Inquisitor yet, which can happen because there's a lot of big breaks in between the events, he's pretty useful. I like him in Conquest because his support and his AoE can do a lot of damage. An AoE Dispel is just nice otherwise as well. He can give himself damage immunity on that second special if they had at least 3 stacks of Purge, and then stun them. And he can, if the enemy is a Jedi, he inflicts fear on all non-Jedi allies, which is kind of a rare circumstance. It's like Shakti clones or something. But yeah, I really enjoy using 5th Brother as well. Next up, we got Gar Saxon, and honestly, I don't know too much about his kit. He's surprisingly a tank, which is kind of weird. He gives Empire allies counter chance and some defense, but he just doesn't really have much of a place. I don't know, it like froze there for a second. Doesn't have much of a place, so he is definitely F tier for me. Next up, we got General Veers, And Veers is A tier. I think he is very integral to Imperial Troopers because he obviously has the best leadership, which makes it work, and he's unique. He's giving out 50% turn meter when you kill an enemy. That's what keeps the turn meter train going indefinitely. You just gotta make sure you spread out the kills. Just a great character. I mean, it's mostly about his leadership, but I love his his AoE call to assist, where he can inflict ability block. Doesn't happen super often. You do less damage on the assist, but still a great ability. Next up, we got Grand Admiral Thrawn, and he is bottom of A tier for me. He's still good, but I think he suffered the most from the great nerf of 2021. Because not being able to fracture Galactic Legends, that was like his big thing. Otherwise, I mean, you can fracture like amazing characters that aren't Galactic Legends, like Malgus or like Starkiller or something. But it's less meaningful because you're not trying to cobble together a whole random team to deal with these non-Galactic Legends. So I don't know, but he's still very useful early game, I think. Fracture is very important when in a non-Galactic Legend scenario setting. Turn meter swap is awesome, and his leadership is kind of interesting. You can do some tricks with it, like with Mara Jade, you're getting extra turn meter because you're starting out with a debuff on you. And he's counterattacking a lot when he's in Fracture, so he's not completely out of the match. His basic is interesting because it grants a buff, which then debuffs once it expires. It grants speed up, which causes ability block. I think it's kind of an interesting mechanic. I don't love it, but it's just notable. But yeah, he's still pretty good. I'm going to try to pick up the pace a little bit here. Next up, we got Grand Inquisitor. Amazing character. I really enjoy using him. All of his abilities impress me. His AoE ability block that also cleanses and equalizes his team's health and protection. Torture is a great mechanic, and his basic is hitting multiple times depending on how much purge is out there. And his leadership is very strong as well. He's just a great character, and Inquisitors are a great team. I'm still figuring out the best way to use them in PvP on offense and defense, but still nothing to shake his stick at. Next, we got Grand Moff Tarkin, and he's lower C tier for me. You know, he had his time in the sun with the set 4 datacrons and the turn meter loop where he could just do his like disco dance until he could kill someone with his ultimate firepower. But now it's kind of gone. I mean, he is the fleet commander of the Executrix, which isn't like bumping him up a ton. It's not really bumping him up much at all, which you know, that fleet can beat Executor and Profundity now with the Scythe. It could beat Profundity before it just was less reliable, but still low C tier. He's not that useful on the ground, but he is early game a decent plug-in on a Palpatine team if you don't have anything else, because he does an AoE debuff, which isn't like avoidable, and then he can do his AoE. Next up, we got Iden Versio, and she is definitely S tier for me. She's such a strong character. She's like a zombie. So even at low gear, she's very effective. She takes a lot of scrap Imperial Troopers and makes them a force to be reckoned with. I mean, the counterattacks, protection, recovery, getting 100% turn meter at the start of the match puts her in like a Wat Tambor Han Solo class. So I just love her. She's amazing. And she is just a Commander Luke Skywalker killer in 3v3. But that's just because people usually don't put Han Solo with them or Chewie, which would really shut it down. But just an amazing character. I'm looking forward to seeing how her ship plays out. Next, we got IPD, Imperial Probe Droid. And he's bottom of C tier for me. Not much to him. He has a buff dispel, which is his most useful thing. He's got a level 7 Datacron right now, which is kind of interesting. But he could probably even go lower. He's just not much going on. His unique does he gives him some extra max health, and at the end of each droid ally's turn or Empire ally's turn, he gains some turn meter, but there's nothing impressive there. Next up, we got ISC, Imperial Super Commando, and he gets also F tier by his buddy Gar Saxon. He's just not used. I mean, together they pilot the Gauntlet, which is a decent ship, but I don't think it's worth prioritizing gear and relic mats on useless land characters for that ship, because that ship isn't really a game changer. I do like the ship though. I wish I had it, all other things considered. Enough about him. I'm gonna go to Lord Vader, the best Empire character in the game. No arguments. Because he's obviously a galactic legend, and I think he's way better than a lot of people give him credit for. Just super strong. He can beat pretty much any galactic legend on offense with the right team, and like a full 5v5 standard setup. And he's just enjoyable to use. He's a great solo threat. The only caveat is if you're going against Rey, you want to bring in a dark side Ufu to help you reduce damage from the light side unaligned force users, which Rey, Ben Solo, and JDR are. I'm not sure how I'm going to use him in 5v5. I'm probably going to keep him on offense because he's a sit-and duck for troopers right now. And I'll try to figure out what is best to use him on, probably Rey. But he stacks mastery like crazy. If you get to like 3 ultimates in one match, his damage is going to be through the roof. Is very survivable, so I love using him in Conquest because he helps keep the whole team alive pretty easily. Just amazing character. Love Lord Vader. Next up, we got Magma Trooper. Not too much to say about him. He's D tier. He works good with Iden. He gets a lot of turn meter the first time. He resists a debuff or suffers a debuff each turn, which is kind of crazy, but he can't do much with that turn. He's got his bomb, which removes turn meter, but it's still not very threatening. Next character is Mara Jade, and Mara Jade is another S tier character. She is just fantastic. Love using her. Even without she came out at the exact same time as Starkiller, or she was the last Marquee, and then like a week later Starkiller came out. So it's hard to know her in a world without Starkiller. But with just Palpatine, her and Palpatine just put on a show. Just tons of turn meter. Tons of turn meter reduction with a stagger, tenacity. It's just, I don't know, she's a dream come true for a Palpatine team. Love Mara Jade, super strong. Next up we got Moff Gideon, and Moff Gideon still top of the A tier. To me, his most useful mechanic is Demoralized, just nerfing the enemy team's damage by a significant margin. Reducing turn meter is also helpful. Other than that, his gets like more lackluster, like his basic doesn't do much. Armor Shred is kind of underwhelming as a whole attack, a special. But it's still pretty useful. You can get creative with him, like running him with a Padme team, because they don't lose turn meter, and he's super fast. So, great character, still higher A tier in my opinion. Sister is top of B tier for me. Probably the most all-around useful Inquisitor because she's a tank and she can find use in other teams other than with the Inquisitors. But of course her main home is the Inquisitor team. Right now she's got an AoE Fear if you have that level 7 Datacron, which I do have, but I'm probably going to stick with Grand Inquisitor and 5s. But yeah, just durable tank. Goes well with Lord Vader and kind of any Empire team. Maybe without the Datacron she has an AoE Daze. It's pretty strong. Her basics a little underwhelming, and first special's a little underwhelming, but she's still durable and has that AoE Daze. Next up, we got Range Trooper, and Range Trooper is just, I don't know, kind of a thankless character that does a lot of good for whatever team he's on. He goes well with either Iden Versio or the standard Imperial Trooper team, because he's boosting turn meter, or he's giving protection up, and he's causing assists, so I guess that indirectly is boosting turn meter. And he gives retribution up, which is great, because if you actually do lose your turn meter train, and you get like AoE, you're probably going to get another turn again right away. But yeah, he gives Imperial Trooper allies 50% chance to call another buffed Imperial Trooper ally to assist when they use an ability during their turn. So he is very integral in keeping that turn meter train going. And he has some extra tenacity on his unique. That's not the most important thing. Next up, we got Royal Guard, and Royal Guard is a former joke of a character, but now it kind of went from 0 to hero. Mid A tier for Royal Guard, and pretty much permanently at home with Lord Vader. Was redesigned and reworked for Lord Vader because they gained 5%. Max health equal to 5% of their allied leaders' max health, which I think is before the conversion of protection to max health. Then they double their health. and that's also before they combine it with their protection. So load them up on health. At the end of its turn, if an ally took damage, all Empire allies recover 6% health, which is huge on a Lord Vader team. So he's always healing up the team. They can throw out defense up and heal over time. And retribution. So great facilitator, almost like a little support character there too, in addition to a tank. So great, but mainly stuck with Lord Vader. Next we got Second Sister. Second Sister, top of the C tier. Someone told me they like using Second Sister over fifth brother, no, or eighth brother in the Inquisitor team, but I don't prefer Second Sister. She has some big damage on one target, but she doesn't facilitate the rest of the team very well. She does have a great ship, so maybe that could theoretically bump her a little bit, but I am still mainly focusing on characters for these lists, or the ground game. So she is the Inquisitor in the C tier. Another Inquisitor, we got Seventh Sister, and she is higher B tier. She is indisposable for an Inquisitor team because she is the healer. She gives damage immunity. She has a buff dispel, single target, and she's assisting constantly. So you can't get rid of her when you're in threes. Like, she's the one you keep more than anyone else, even more than Ninth Sister. You're not always going to keep Ninth Sister. You might use Fifth Brother. And in Conquest, she's amazing. Since she is a healer and support, and she has a decent damage modifier on her basic, she's assisting all the time and doing like 300,000 damage. It's pretty crazy. Next up, we got Shore Trooper, and Shore Trooper is mid-C tier. I do think Shore Trooper is very decent. I like giving crit immunity up to the whole team, and he's got a taunt, which is great. And he's giving out turn meter to Empire allies whenever they use a special ability, but it's only if he's taunting. So I use him with our Iden Versio in that team, which is very nice. And he is a pre-taunt, which is useful. So maybe it could be bumped, but considering all the other characters I have in the list, I think he fits well in the slot he's given. Next we got Snow Trooper. And Snow Trooper, not too much to him. Top of D tier. He gets, I think he gives out turn meter when units are defeated, or he gets turn meter, and then gives half. He gets 30%, gives half to Emperor allies. I mean, he used to be part of the Imperial Trooper team, but he's one of the ones I don't have geared up. So, a little lackluster D tier for him. Next up, we got Stormtrooper, and Stormtrooper is, I think, the worst of the Empire tanks, or Imperial Trooper Empire tanks. He doesn't have the pre-taunt. He does have some extra defense that he gives out, which can be annoying. He has 40% defense for each living Empire ally, and he gives out 30% defense to Imperial Troopers. And at the start of his turn, Imperial Remnant allies get 20% protection up for one turn. I think that's part of the Zeta. Yeah, so that is part of the Zeta. And, he just takes some damage. Not very useful otherwise. I have him at Relic 5 to use with Iden, but he's just kind of a throw-in. Next, we got TIE Fighter Pilot. And TIE Fighter Pilot, I don't know, not super useful. I mean, he's got a good ship. I really love the turn meter gain to the capital ship if you're not facing Profundity. And, I mean, integral to countering Executor with Malevolence. That was a very clever theory craft, whoever came up with that. And, I don't know, AoE ability block. Is it AoE ability block, or is it AoE buff immunity? Yeah, it's buff immunity for it's AoE buff immunity and ability block on the primary target. So, I mean, that is decent. I used him a little bit when I was a newer player in my Empire team, even in Arena, the squad Arena, so he was something back then, but it's just, I'm not too much to speak of, so lower C tier for him. We got one more character that's not currently in the game, and that is Third Sister, Riva. And I am assuming she'll be S tier just from looking at her kit. Like, it seems like she'll be S tier, but I don't want to place her really. The thing that seems most overpowered to me is the death mark in her kit. Whenever purges dispelled during an enemy's turn, character gains Death Mark for 2 turns, so you're gonna just try to avoid cleansing. Death Mark is a crazy debuff. Like, it's a force taunt and 50% damage on them, like health damage whenever they just get hit. I think it's a crazy debuff, and this is gonna be throwing it out like candy. It's just some other great stuff. I'm not gonna get into everything. She has some armor shred. She has hatred like Scion, so she's gonna come back from the dead at least once, unless you prevent revives. But yeah, she looks like a very strong character from all signals. But yeah, we'll see. It's gonna be a while for me to get her. I got like, I don't know, 15 shards. But yeah, we'll see. Anyway, thanks for watching. Let me know what faction you want to see next in a ranking like this. And let me know what you think, who's higher than they should be, who's lower. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching. See you next time.